Welcome to True Crime Stories by Pam. Imagine waking up every morning and walking past a corpse. Imagine eating breakfast while a decomposing body lies in your bedroom. Imagine going to 7-Eleven to buy snacks using a dead man's debit card. Now imagine doing this for 18 months. 547 days. While 8 chihuahuas chew on the remains. While you collect nearly $20,000 in Social Security checks. While you lie to police. While you pretend everything is normal. This actually happened. In Colorado. In 2024. A married couple lived with their lover's corpse for a year and a half. And they almost got away with it. But a persistent brother wouldn't give up. A clever trap exposed the fraud. And when police finally searched the apartment, what they found under a deflated air mattress will haunt you forever. I am Pam. And this is the story of the throuple who became a couple. The 18-month cover-up. The brother who refused to stop searching. And the greed that turned a bedroom into a tomb. Warning. This story contains disturbing details about decomposition and animal involvement. But you need to hear it. Because what these people did is beyond comprehension. Stay with me until the end. Because the way this gets exposed is absolutely brilliant. Lakewood, Colorado. It's a suburb west of Denver. Working class. Affordable apartments. Regular people trying to make ends meet. At 3400 South Ammon Street, there's a modest apartment complex. Nothing fancy. Just basic units with thin walls and shared parking lots. In one of these apartments lives an unusual household. James Agnew, 55 years old. His wife Suzanne Agnew, 57 years old. And their boyfriend James O'Neill, 64 years old. Yes, you heard that right. A married couple and their boyfriend. All living together. All in an intimate relationship. What some people call a throuple. This arrangement has been going on for years. They all sleep in the same bedroom. Suzanne and James Agnew share a bed. James O'Neill sleeps on an air mattress on the floor right next to them. They share finances. They share space. They share their lives. Neighbors know about the arrangement. Nobody really cares. It's Colorado. People live how they want. But in December 2023, this three-person relationship is about to become a two-person nightmare. Because James O'Neill is about to die. And what happens next will shock an entire nation. December 3, 2023. James O'Neill calls 911. He's scared. He reports that his roommate James Agnew has been making threats. Acting erratic. O'Neill tells the dispatcher he's worried Agnew might hurt him. The dispatcher asks if he wants officers to respond. O'Neill hesitates. No, he says. I just wanted to report it. Just in case something happens. The call ends. Officers are not dispatched. Life continues. But O'Neill and Suzanne start discussing moving out. Getting away from James Agnew. Finding somewhere safer to live. A week passes. Maybe 2 weeks. The exact date is unclear. It's sometime between December 10th and December 20th. The three of them go to bed like normal. Suzanne and James Agnew in their bed. James O'Neill on his air mattress on the floor. They've been partying. Drinking. Doing drugs. James Agnew later admits there was probably methamphetamine or cocaine involved that night. O'Neill has health problems. He's 64. He's not in great shape. Combining drugs with poor health is dangerous. But they do it anyway. And when they wake up the next morning, James O'Neill is dead. Suzanne wakes up first. She looks over at the air mattress. Something's wrong. James O'Neill isn't moving. She calls his name. Jim. Jim, wake up. Nothing. She climbs out of bed. Shakes James Agnew awake. Something's wrong with Jim. They both go to O'Neill. Suzanne checks for a pulse. Nothing. James Agnew tries to move O'Neill to perform CPR. But O'Neill is heavy. Unresponsive. Cold. They can tell for sure that he's dead. Most people in this situation would immediately call 911. Report the death. Let the authorities handle it. But James Agnew and Suzanne don't do that. According to Suzanne's later confession, James Agnew suggests they call the police. But Suzanne refuses. She tells him no. She's not ready to give up Jim. Not ready to say goodbye. She wants to keep him there. With them. In their bedroom. James Agnew goes along with it. Maybe because he understands. Maybe because he's in shock. Or maybe because they both quickly realize something. Jim's Social Security checks. $967 every month. Deposited automatically. If they report the death, the money stops. But if nobody knows Jim is dead, the checks keep coming. And they have his debit card. They know his PIN. They can keep collecting his money. Indefinitely. Day 1. The body is on the air mattress. Suzanne and James go about their day. They don't call police. They don't call a funeral home. They just leave him there. It's surreal. Horrifying. But they do it. Day 2. The body is starting to smell. They open windows. Light candles. Spray air freshener. They sleep in the same bedroom. Just feet away from a corpse. Day 3. Day 4. Day 5. The horror becomes routine. They walk past the body to get dressed. They step over it to reach the closet. They try not to look at it. Try not to think about what's happening to it as decomposition sets in. And then the chihuahuas notice. Suzanne has 8 chihuahuas. Small dogs. They live in the apartment too. And dogs are scavengers. They're attracted to the smell of death. One day, maybe a week after O'Neill died, Suzanne walks into the bedroom and sees something horrifying. Her chihuahuas are chewing on Jim's body. Eating the decomposing flesh. She screams. Chases them away. But the dogs keep coming back. The smell draws them. So Suzanne comes up with a solution. She takes the deflated air mattress. The one Jim died on. And she lays it over his body. Like a tarp. Like you'd cover furniture you don't want ruined. That's how she treats her boyfriend's corpse. Cover it up so the dogs can't get to it. Problem solved. With Jim's body covered and hidden, life continues. Suzanne and James have his debit card. They know his PIN. On December 10th, Jim's Social Security payment arrives. $967 deposited into his account. Suzanne and James don't hesitate. They go to a 7-Eleven. Use Jim's card to buy snacks. Cigarettes. Whatever they want. The card works. Nobody questions it. Nobody knows Jim is dead. So they keep going. Every few days, they use Jim's card. ATM withdrawals. Gas station purchases. Grocery stores. Online shopping. Bills. Rent. January 2024. Jim has been dead for about a month. Another Social Security payment arrives. Suzanne and James spend it. February. Another payment. March. April. May. Month after month, the money keeps coming. And month after month, Suzanne and James keep spending it. They're not saving it. They're not investing it. They're just using it for normal daily expenses. Living expenses. Like Jim is still contributing to the household even though he's decomposing under an air mattress in their bedroom. By the time they're caught, they'll have stolen more than $17,000. But they're not thinking about getting caught. They're thinking about how easy this is. How Jim's death has become their cash cow. Winter turns to spring. Spring turns to summer. Jim's body continues to decompose. The smell must be overwhelming. But Suzanne and James have gotten used to it. Or maybe they're just numb to it. They still sleep in that bedroom. Still walk past the covered corpse every single day. Still live their lives like this is normal. Imagine the psychological state you'd have to be in to do this. The complete detachment from reality. The total lack of empathy or disgust. Most people couldn't spend 5 minutes in a room with a decomposing body. These two spend 18 months. Nobody visits the apartment. Nobody asks about Jim. His family hasn't heard from him in years. He's estranged. Isolated. That's one reason Suzanne and James think they can get away with this. Jim has no one checking on him. No one who will notice he's gone. But what they don't know is that Jim's brother Robert is about to start asking questions. And Robert is not going to accept easy answers. Robert is persistent. Determined. And he's about to crack this case wide open in the most clever way imaginable. But we're not there yet. For now, in the summer of 2024, Suzanne and James are still getting away with it. Still spending Jim's money. Still sleeping next to his corpse. Still believing they're untouchable. June 19, 2024. Robert O'Neill is worried about his brother James. They haven't been close. The family hasn't heard from James since 2019. James's sister spoke to him once in 2021. But nothing since then. Years of silence. Robert decides it's time to check on his brother. Make sure he's okay. So Robert calls the Lakewood Police Department. He requests a welfare check. He gives them James's last known address. 3400 South Ammon Street. The address where Suzanne and James Agnew live. Where James O'Neill's body has been decomposing for 6 months. Lakewood police dispatch 2 officers. They drive to the apartment. Knock on the door. A man answers. The officers ask, "Are you James O'Neill?" The man says, "I'm James." He doesn't give a last name. Just James. The officers explain they're doing a welfare check. His family is concerned. The man is annoyed. "I don't want anything to do with my family," he says. "Tell them to leave me alone. I'm fine. Please leave." The officers look at him. He seems healthy. Alert. No signs of distress. "Okay, sir," they say. We'll let your family know you're fine. They leave. Case closed. Or so they think. The officers report back to Robert O'Neill. We found your brother. He's fine. He just wants to be left alone. He doesn't want contact with family. Robert is confused. That doesn't sound like James. Something feels off. Robert asks if he can see the body camera footage from the welfare check. The police agree. They send him the video. Robert watches. And immediately, his blood runs cold. That's not my brother. That's not James. I don't know who that man is, but it's definitely not my brother. Robert calls the police back. He's insistent. That man in the video is not James O'Neill. I'm absolutely certain. You need to go back there. Something's wrong. The police take this seriously. They investigate. They run the man's face through databases. And they identify him. James David Agnew. Age 55. He lives at that address. But he's not James O'Neill. He's someone else. Someone who apparently answered the door and pretended to be O'Neill. But why? Why would someone impersonate another person during a welfare check? Unless they're hiding something. Unless the real James O'Neill can't come to the door. Because he's dead. Police return to the apartment. This time they're suspicious. This time they're asking hard questions. They knock. James Agnew answers again. Officers explain they know he's not James O'Neill. They know he lied. Where is James O'Neill? Agnew changes his story immediately. Oh, Jim. He doesn't live here anymore. He moved out. Moved where? Agnew shrugs. I don't know. We're not in touch. He just left. When? Agnew is vague. A while ago. Months maybe. Years? Maybe. I can't remember exactly. Officers ask to speak with Suzanne. She comes to the door. They ask her about James O'Neill. Suzanne gives a different story. Jim met some foreign woman online. He moved out to be with her. We don't know where. We haven't heard from him. Officers look at each other. These stories don't match. Something is very wrong here. But without a warrant, they can't search the apartment. They can't force entry. So they leave. But they're not done. They're going to keep investigating. And they're about to get help from an unlikely source. Robert O'Neill. The brother who refuses to give up. Robert O'Neill is smart. If his brother is really missing or dead, there should be signs. So Robert does something clever. He checks James's bank account. Robert has access to some of James's financial information from years ago. He looks at the account activity. And what he sees shocks him. The account is active. Very active. Regular ATM withdrawals. Debit card purchases. Monthly Social Security deposits of $967. All happening recently. Within the past few months. If James moved out and cut ties like the Agnews claimed, why is his bank account being used regularly? Robert sees charges at a specific 7-Eleven location. Multiple transactions. Different dates but same store. He contacts police with this information. Police obtain surveillance footage from that 7-Eleven. They match the timestamps of the transactions to the security camera recordings. And there he is. James Agnew. Walking into the store. Going to the ATM. Using a debit card. Making purchases. Leaving. The card he's using. James O'Neill's card. The police now have proof. James Agnew is using a missing man's debit card. That's financial fraud. That's unauthorized use of a financial device. Police now have enough for a warrant. But they're also going to get one more piece of evidence. Thanks to Robert's brilliant plan. Robert comes up with a genius idea. He's going to set a trap. He calls Suzanne Agnew's phone. Suzanne answers. Robert introduces himself as James O'Neill's brother. He says he has good news. There's an inheritance. Money that needs to be deposited into James's bank account. But James needs to provide some banking information to process the deposit. Suzanne's eyes light up. Inheritance. Money. How much? Robert is vague. Just says it's a substantial amount. But James needs to get on the phone to provide his account details. Suzanne hesitates. Jim is right here, but he doesn't want to talk to family. Robert is insistent. He needs to talk to James directly. Bank policy. Suzanne makes an excuse. Jim is busy right now. But I can give you his information. His account number. His social security number. Everything you need. Robert agrees. Suzanne provides all of James O'Neill's banking details. She's greedy. She wants that inheritance money. She's so focused on the payout that she doesn't realize she's incriminating herself. Because how would she have James's banking information if he moved out months ago and cut all ties? Robert takes the information. Then he delivers the bad news. Actually, the bank requires James to appear in person to sign the paperwork. He needs to come to the bank physically to receive the inheritance. When can he come? There's a long pause. Suzanne's voice changes. Oh. In person. Yes. It's bank policy for large sums. Security reasons. Another pause. Suzanne says she'll call back with dates. Then she hangs up. And she never calls back. Never responds to follow-up messages. Complete radio silence. Robert reports all of this to police. The banking details. The claim that James was right there but wouldn't talk. The sudden cutoff when in-person appearance was required. Police now know for certain. James O'Neill is not alive. If he were alive, he'd show up for an inheritance. He'd at least call his brother to find out details. The fact that Suzanne immediately ended contact when physical appearance was required proves O'Neill can't appear. Because he's either missing or dead. And given that his body hasn't turned up anywhere, police strongly suspect he's dead inside that apartment. They just need to get inside to prove it. July 3, 2024. Police have everything they need. Surveillance footage of James Agnew using O'Neill's debit card. Financial records showing over $17,000 stolen. Suzanne providing O'Neill's banking details despite claiming he moved out. The failed inheritance trap. Multiple conflicting stories from the Agnews. And a missing man who hasn't been seen in over 6 months. Police obtain a search warrant for the apartment. They're going in. And they're expecting to find a body. But there's a complication. James Agnew has an outstanding arrest warrant for an unrelated issue. So police decide to grab him first. They see him leaving the apartment. They approach. James Agnew, you're under arrest for failure to appear. Agnew doesn't resist. He's cooperative. Police take him into custody. Now Suzanne is alone in the apartment. And she knows what's coming. She knows they're going to search. She knows they're going to find Jim. And she makes a decision. She's going to confess. Before they even walk inside. She's going to tell them everything. Detectives approach the apartment. They knock. Suzanne answers. They tell her they have a search warrant. They're going to search the apartment. Suzanne looks at them. And without any hesitation, without even waiting for them to start searching, she says 7 words that confirm their worst fears. You'll find James O'Neill's body inside. The detectives freeze. She just confessed. Just like that. She said, "We understand. You'll find his body. He's deceased. He's in the bedroom." Detectives immediately call for backup. For the coroner. For crime scene investigators. They read Suzanne her Miranda rights. She says she understands and agrees to talk. She's not fighting. She's not lawyering up. She's just ready to finally tell someone. After 18 months of lying, hiding, living with a corpse, Suzanne is done. The secret is too heavy. The stress is too much. She wants it over. So she leads detectives into the apartment. Into the bedroom. And she points to a deflated air mattress on the floor. He's under there. That's Jim. Detectives carefully lift the deflated air mattress. And underneath is James O'Neill. Or what's left of him. 18 months of decomposition in a Colorado apartment. The body is severely decomposed. Skeletal in places. The smell is overwhelming even for experienced investigators who've seen countless death scenes. Crime scene photographers document everything. The position of the body. The condition of the remains. The gnaw marks from the chihuahuas. The investigators are professionals, but even they're disturbed. This is one of the worst scenes they've encountered. Not because of violence. But because of the calculated neglect. The absolute disregard for human dignity. The coroner arrives. The body is carefully removed from the apartment. Transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsy. Initial examination suggests death from natural causes, possibly complicated by drug use. No signs of trauma. No signs of violence. James O'Neill likely died from a combination of his poor health and whatever drugs he'd taken that night. This wasn't murder. But what James and Suzanne Agnew did after his death. That was absolutely criminal. Abuse of a corpse. Tampering with a deceased body. Theft. Fraud. And soon, they'll be charged with all of it. Suzanne is taken to the police station for a formal interview. Detectives want the full story. How long has he been dead? Suzanne estimates sometime between December 10th and December 20th, 2023. So about 6.5 months. How did he die? She says they all went to bed after partying. When she woke up, Jim was dead. She checked for a pulse. There wasn't one. James Agnew tried to do CPR, but Jim was clearly gone. Why didn't you call police? This is where Suzanne's story gets emotional. She says she wasn't ready to give up Jim. She wanted to keep him with her. She admits she knew it was wrong. Says it multiple times. I knew it was wrong. I knew I should have reported it. But I just couldn't. Detectives ask about the money. Did you use his Social Security benefits? Suzanne admits yes. They used Jim's debit card. Spent his monthly checks. Used it for bills and shopping and daily expenses. Did James Agnew know about this? Yes. He was involved too. In fact, James Agnew later admits that the Social Security income was definitely a consideration in deciding whether to report the death. They chose money over doing the right thing. What about the body? Why was it covered with the mattress? Suzanne explains the Chihuahuas. How they started chewing on Jim. How she had to cover him to keep the dogs away. The detectives listened to all of this in disbelief. This woman lived with a corpse for 18 months. Slept in the same room. Walked past it daily. Let dogs eat it. And used the dead man's money. It's beyond comprehension. James Agnew is also interviewed. His story matches Suzanne's for the most part. He admits O'Neill died in December 2023. Admits they didn't call police. Admits they used O'Neill's Social Security money. He's less emotional than Suzanne. More matter of fact. He says he doesn't remember exactly when Jim died, but he knew he was dead. He admits he initially suggested calling police, but Suzanne didn't want to. So he went along with her decision. He admits the Social Security income was definitely a consideration. He admits there was probably drug use the night O'Neill died. Detectives asked James about the welfare check. When police came in June, you pretended to be James O'Neill. Why? James Agnew admits that when officers asked for James, he just said I'm James. He didn't technically lie by saying he was O'Neill. He just didn't correct their assumption. He played on the name confusion. Hoped they'd think he was O'Neill and go away. And it almost worked. If Robert O'Neill hadn't reviewed the body camera footage, if he hadn't realized that wasn't his brother, James Agnew might have fooled them permanently. But he didn't. And now both James and Suzanne are going to face serious criminal charges. James David Agnew and Suzanne Ruth Agnew are both charged with multiple felonies. Both face charges of tampering with a deceased human body. Abuse of a corpse. These are serious charges that carry significant prison time. James Agnew is also charged with theft by larceny over $2,000. Unauthorized use of a financial transaction device over $2,000. And 2 counts of introducing contraband into a correctional facility. That last charge relates to something he tried to sneak into jail after his arrest. Suzanne is charged with theft between $5,000 and $20,000. And unauthorized use of a financial transaction device in the same amount range. If convicted on all charges, both face decades in prison. The financial crimes alone carry 5 to 10 years each. The corpse abuse charges add more time. James has additional charges that could add years more. And there's no sympathy from the public. Online comments are brutal. These monsters let their boyfriend rot while they spent his money. They let dogs eat him. They slept next to his corpse. They deserve whatever they get. The case hasn't gone to trial yet as of this recording. But prosecutors have overwhelming evidence. The confessions. The surveillance footage. The financial records. The body. The Agnews are facing justice. And it's going to be harsh. Let's talk about the relationship itself. How does a throuple even form? According to what Suzanne told police, she, James Agnew, and James O'Neill had been in a 3-way intimate relationship for many years. They all lived together in that small apartment. All shared the same bedroom. Suzanne and James Agnew shared a bed. O'Neill slept on an air mattress on the floor right next to them. They functioned as a unit. All 3 working together. Sharing finances. Making decisions together. For years, this worked for them. But there were cracks. Remember that 911 call from December 3, 2023? O'Neill called police saying James Agnew was making threats. Acting erratic. O'Neill was scared enough to report it even though he didn't want officers to respond. Suzanne later tells police that she and O'Neill were discussing moving out together. Getting away from James Agnew because his behavior was becoming too much. So the relationship was already breaking down before O'Neill died. There was tension. Conflict. Fear. And then O'Neill dies suddenly. And instead of it ending the conflict, it creates a new twisted dynamic. James and Suzanne living with their dead boyfriend. Using his money. Hiding his body. The three-way relationship didn't end with O'Neill's death. It just transformed into something monstrous. Let's address the most disturbing detail. The Chihuahuas. Suzanne owned 8 of them. Small dogs. They lived in the apartment too. And when O'Neill died, these dogs eventually noticed. Dogs are scavengers. They're attracted to death. They started chewing on O'Neill's body. Eating the decomposing flesh. This is what finally prompted Suzanne to cover the body with the deflated air mattress. Not out of respect for O'Neill. But to stop the dogs from eating him. When police raided the apartment, animal control was called. All 8 Chihuahuas were removed from the home. We don't know what happened to them. Whether they were adopted out or euthanized. But those dogs lived in a home with a decomposing corpse for 18 months. They breathed that air. They walked past that body. They ate human remains. The psychological impact on the dogs, if dogs can have PTSD, must have been significant. And the fact that Suzanne and James could continue caring for these pets, feeding them, playing with them, while a corpse rotted in the same room? It shows a complete detachment from normal human psychology. These are not normal people. These are people who can compartmentalize horror in a way most of us cannot comprehend. Here's a question that haunts this case. Did any of the neighbors notice? This was an apartment complex. Thin walls. Shared ventilation. The smell of a decomposing body is overwhelming. Unforgettable. How did nobody notice? Police haven't released any statements from neighbors. No one has come forward saying they smelled something or reported suspicious activity. Maybe the Agnews kept windows open constantly. Maybe they used extreme amounts of air freshener. Maybe the apartment's ventilation was poor and the smell stayed contained. Or maybe neighbors did notice but didn't report it. Think about that. If you live in an apartment and smell something terrible coming from next door, what do? Most people might complain to the building manager. Some might call police for a wellness check. But many people would just ignore it. Mind their own business. Not want to get involved. And that's possibly what happened here. O'Neill's body decomposed for 18 months and nobody reported anything suspicious. Nobody called police. Nobody checked on that apartment. James and Suzanne got away with it for a year and a half in part because of apathy. Because neighbors didn't want to get involved. That's a chilling thought. Let's break down the money. O'Neill died sometime between December 10th and 20th, 2023. He was found July 3rd, 2024. That's approximately 6.5 months. But the Agnews spent money on O'Neill's card for about 18 months total according to charges. That means they were using his card even before he died. Let's focus on after his death. 6.5 months. O'Neill received $967 per month in Social Security. Times 6.5 months equals approximately $6,285 just from Social Security payments. But the Agnews spent $17,406 total. That means they were also spending O'Neill's savings. Money already in his account. They drained his account completely. Spent every penny. Where did it go? The affidavit mentions ATM withdrawals. Purchases at 7-Eleven and other convenience stores. Online shopping. Bills. Normal everyday expenses. They weren't buying luxury items. They were just using O'Neill's money to live. To pay rent. To buy food. To fill their car with gas. They treated his money like it was theirs. Like he'd given them permission. But he was dead. Under an air mattress. In their bedroom. And they stepped over him to go spend his money. There was additional fraud beyond just spending O'Neill's Social Security money. Police discovered that someone forged O'Neill's signature on a car title. O'Neill owned a 2008 Ford Expedition. The Agnews wanted to transfer the title to their names. But they couldn't do that legally because O'Neill was dead. So they forged his signature. Police compared the forged signature on a title application filed April 12, 2024, to O'Neill's real signature on a similar application he'd filed in person August 3, 2023, before his death. The signatures didn't match. The forgery was obvious. This shows premeditation. This wasn't just keeping quiet about a death. This was actively committing fraud. Forging legal documents. Stealing O'Neill's property. The Agnews weren't just hoping to ride out the Social Security payments for a while. They were systematically taking everything O'Neill owned. His money. His car. His identity. Everything. If they'd succeeded in transferring the car title, they probably would have sold the vehicle. Pocketed that money too. They were going to squeeze every last dollar out of their dead boyfriend. That's pure greed. That's not grief or denial or psychological trauma. That's calculated theft. Robert O'Neill is the hero of this story. Without his persistence, James O'Neill's body might still be in that apartment. Robert hadn't spoken to his brother since 2019. 5 years of no contact. Most people would assume that means the brother wants to be left alone. Would respect that distance. But Robert had a bad feeling. Something told him to check. To make sure James was okay. So he requested a wellness check. And when that check seemed off, when the man in the body camera footage wasn't his brother, Robert didn't let it go. He pushed. He investigated. Robert checked banking records. Found the suspicious activity. Set up that brilliant inheritance trap. Provided all this information to police. Built the case that led to the search warrant. Without Robert, police might have closed the file. Marked O'Neill as wanting no contact with family. Moved on. The Agnews would have kept collecting checks. Kept living with the corpse. Eventually the apartment lease might have ended. They might have moved. And then what? Would they have taken the body with them? Buried it somewhere? The longer this went undiscovered, the worse it could have gotten. Robert prevented all of that. He gave his brother dignity in death. He brought the Agnews to justice. He's the reason we know this story. And he's the reason 2 criminals are facing prison. The autopsy of James O'Neill's remains was complicated. After 18 months of decomposition, determining an exact cause of death is difficult. The medical examiner's preliminary findings suggest death from natural causes, possibly complicated by drug use. There were no signs of trauma. No gunshot wounds. No stab wounds. No strangulation marks. No blunt force injuries. O'Neill was 64 years old. He had health problems. According to James Agnew, they'd all been using drugs that night. Methamphetamine or cocaine, Agnew admitted. That combination, poor health, age, and drugs, could easily cause a fatal cardiac event or stroke. So this likely wasn't a murder. O'Neill probably died naturally. The Agnews probably didn't kill him. But what they did after his death is still criminal. In Colorado, tampering with a deceased body is a felony. You cannot keep a corpse in your home without reporting the death. You cannot hide a body. You cannot interfere with a death investigation. The law requires you to notify authorities when someone dies. The Agnews violated all of this. And the theft charges are separate and additional. Even if O'Neill died naturally, even if the Agnews didn't cause his death, they're still guilty of serious crimes for what they did after. Suzanne told police she wasn't ready to give Jim up. That's why she didn't report the death. She wanted to keep him with her. On the surface, this sounds like grief. Like denial. Like a woman who loved her boyfriend so much she couldn't accept he was gone. But let's examine that claim. If Suzanne truly just wanted to keep Jim's body because of love and grief, why did she let the Chihuahuas eat him? Why did she cover him with an air mattress like he was garbage? Why didn't she preserve the body somehow? Embalm it? Keep it in a coffin? Some people do this legally with home funerals. The truth is, keeping the body had nothing to do with love. It had to do with money. As long as Jim's death wasn't reported, the Social Security checks kept coming. That's the real reason. Suzanne's grief story is an excuse. A justification. A way to make it sound less evil than it was. But the evidence doesn't support the grief narrative. The evidence supports greed. Pure and simple greed. Suzanne and James wanted the money. So they kept the body hidden. Let it rot. Let dogs eat it. Slept next to it for 18 months. That's not love. That's something much darker. That's treating a human being like a commodity. Like an asset to be exploited. Even in death. As of this recording, the case hasn't gone to trial. Both James and Suzanne Agnew are facing multiple felony charges. If they go to trial, the evidence against them is overwhelming. Their own confessions. Video surveillance of them using O'Neill's card. The body found exactly where Suzanne said it would be. Financial records showing $17,000 stolen. The forged car title. Interviews where they admit everything. No jury is going to acquit them. Their only hope is a plea deal. But what kind of deal could prosecutors offer? The crimes are severe. The facts are horrifying. Public outrage is massive. Prosecutors might demand lengthy prison sentences even with a plea. James faces additional charges that Suzanne doesn't. He faces more time. He might flip on Suzanne to reduce his sentence. Or maybe they'll stand together. Either way, both are looking at years, possibly decades, in prison. The corpse abuse charge alone can carry 5 years. The financial crimes add 5 to 10 each. Stack those sentences and you're looking at 15 to 20 years or more. The Agnews are in their late 50s. They'll likely spend the rest of their good years behind bars. That's justice for what they did to James O'Neill. This case teaches us something important about social isolation. James O'Neill was estranged from his family. Hadn't spoken to them in years. No close friends outside the throuple. No co-workers checking on him. No regular social contact. That isolation made him vulnerable. It meant nobody would notice when he disappeared. Nobody would ask questions for months. And that's exactly what the Agnews counted on. They knew O'Neill had no one. They knew his death might go unnoticed indefinitely. If you have elderly or vulnerable family members, check on them. Even if you're not close. Even if years have passed since you last spoke. A simple phone call could prevent something like this. Robert O'Neill hadn't spoken to his brother in 5 years. But he checked anyway. And that check saved James O'Neill from remaining hidden forever. If someone in your life has isolated themselves, if they've cut off contact, don't just accept it. Try to reach out. Make sure they're okay. Because isolation creates vulnerability. And vulnerable people attract predators. The Agnews might not have killed O'Neill. But they absolutely preyed on him after death. And they could only do that because he was isolated. James O'Neill deserved better. He deserved to die with dignity. He deserved a proper funeral. He deserved to have his family notified. He deserved respect. Instead, he was left to rot on an air mattress. Covered with deflated plastic. Eaten by dogs. Used as a source of income. Treated like garbage. For 18 months. 547 days. His body decomposing while the people he loved stepped over him to buy cigarettes with his money. It's unspeakable. It's inhuman. And it's real. This happened in 2024. In a modern American city. In an apartment complex where neighbors lived all around. And nobody stopped it until one brother refused to give up. Robert O'Neill gave his brother dignity in death. Brought justice to those who violated him. And exposed one of the most disturbing crimes I've ever covered. James and Suzanne Agnew thought they could get away with it. Thought they were clever. Thought nobody would notice. But greed always trips you up. Evil always gets exposed. The truth always comes out. If this story disturbed you, good. It should. This is what happens when greed overcomes basic human decency. When money matters more than dignity. When isolation allows predators to operate unchecked. Hit that like button if you want justice for James O'Neill. Subscribe to True Crime Stories by Pam for more cases that need to be told. Share this video so people understand what happened and why we must stay connected to our loved ones. And leave a comment. If you were a neighbor and smelled something suspicious, would you report it? Or would you mind your own business? Because that question might be the difference between catching criminals and letting them operate for 18 more months. Thank you for watching. I am Pam. And remember, check on your family members. Check on your neighbors. Don't assume silence means everything is okay. Because sometimes, silence means someone needs help. And sometimes, like in James O'Neill's case, silence means someone is being exploited even in death. Stay vigilant. Stay connected. And never let greed override your humanity. Rest in peace, James O'Neill. You deserved so much better than what you got. And remember, the truth always comes out. Always.